Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. In the comics, TV, and movies, we will go from the Mojo-verse to Earth 616 to the nation of Wakanda in order to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the man without fear, Chris.
I'm your friendly neighborhood Brent.
Alliance Assemble. Volume 136. And if you're watching live, we have another person joining us. For those that are listening, you'll hear his voice shortly. Mr. Sean O'Connell is joining us tonight.
Hello, guys. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, you've got a new book. It's been a year since you put out the call to say, hey, I finished a book. Anyone want to come on? We jumped at the chance. So now the week of release, we're going to jump back at the chance to talk with you now that we've finally gotten a chance to read it and delve into all the good stuff.
Well, I promise it won't be another year. It'll be much longer than that before another book comes out. So let's not make this an annual thing. But I appreciate you guys having me on.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Well, before we get into all the good stuff with that, we're going to get our network plugs out of the way. So we are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance network with 8 shows that go from the wide range of geek and nerdom. To see our full schedule, check out our show notes below and subscribe to the Geek Ultimate Alliance on Twitter at GUA Pod Network so you know when they all are dropping. We also have a Patreon if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way. We've got 2 tiers. We've got our $1 tiers, our tip jar to say, hey, you think we're doing a good job? And then we've got our $5 tier with ad-free episodes, early access episodes, and Patreon exclusive shows. And as you know, listeners, we've got our Marvel Alliance show. We can watch this all day, the Marvel Alliance MC Rewatch. We've got 10 episodes, with the most recent one re-looking at Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So I want to thank our patrons. We cannot do this without your support. And if you want to join our Patreon with all the lovely shows we got on there with Travis's Top 5, Plays for the First Time, DC Alliance looking at all the DC movies from the long way back machine, go to www.patreon.com/GUA network and become part of our patrons. And if you can't join us on Patreon, totally understand. But if you want to get a 30 to 90 seconds and rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast your choice may be. And last but certainly not least, we want to thank our official sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com, for your omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. JP and the crew at OPB have got it going on with immaculate customer service, excellent packaging, ships around the world. And we've got these lovely Marvel Omnis that are coming out in sometime next year. At that point, we've got Uncanny X-Men Volume 5. We've got Spider-Man by Joe Kelly. We've got Captain Marvel, Janice Vell, and X-23 Omnibus. All these lovely Omnis coming out for you. Go to OPB and use that code MarvelGUA at checkout for $2 off every single order. It'll let you know that you are a listener, and we want to thank them for being our official sponsor. So we've got a few network changes coming up next week. As you know, Brent, I think there's a movie coming out next week.
There is. It actually does feel like it's been a little while, but we have Black Panther Wakanda Forever next week.
Yes, Black Panther Wakanda Forever is coming out, so that means we got to do a little change up in the lineup. So we will not be going live at our normal showtime next Thursday night because Brent and I will either have seen or will be seeing Wakanda Forever at our normally scheduled time. And so A Walk Through the Multiverse will drop their newest episode on Friday morning. We want to thank Joe for making that change up in the schedule. And then we will go live with our Black Panther Wakanda Forever spoiler review at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll just be Brent and I, as listeners, you have asked to kind of change up our review format. It'll just be us reviewing it, giving all our thoughts, spoilers, and all the good stuff. And the audio will drop Saturday morning in all the feeds. And then we will be remiss by not promoting our Geekverse Brethren 24-hour charity stream for the BC Children's Hospital. Will start this Saturday, November 5th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. A lot of different events going on. The biggest one, the granddaddy of them all, the trivia game starts at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Brent, you are on Team Travis, and I have yet to be wooed by either one of them yet, and I will let everyone know what team I'm going to be on the night of the night of the main event. But again, if you would like to donate, go check out the Geekverse podcast Twitter handle for that link. At that point, the goal is, I believe, $3,500 if I'm mistaken. And again, great cause at that point, great event. We're all looking forward to be a part of it. All right, I think that's all the network stuff out of the way. So, yeah, let us get into. So, for those of you who do not know who Mr. Sean O'Connell is, what he's doing here besides the book, he is the managing director for Cinema Blend, co-host of the Real Blend podcast, writer of Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. And he's written his newest book, With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of the Comic Book Blockbuster. So you got the sophomore book coming out. How does it feel with two basically, big topics at that point?
Yeah, and I never would have dreamed that I was going to write a book. There were people, when anyone finds out that you're a writer in on some level, they're always like, "Oh, so you're going to work towards writing a book someday?" And I was always like, "No, I have no interest in that," because I couldn't think of a topic or a story that was compelling enough to want to drag out into book form. I write blog posts, I write news, I write reviews, and that was always kind of my format. The Snyder Cut book came together because I was truly fascinated by that movement and by everything that was going on surrounding it in that universe, everything that had happened to Zach, everything that had happened to Joss Whedon coming in and then redoing his cut, and the fight by that fan base and their use of social media to generate awareness for the Snyder Cut, and then everything they were doing on a charitable side. I just became fascinated with that. So, and I'm a Marvel kid, I've always been a Marvel kid. So the idea that my first book was a DC book is kind of ridiculous to me. But I loved that story, and I wanted to I wanted to tell it as best as I could. Once I finished, I realized that whenever I had downtime, I missed the process of noodling through, what a chapter might look like, or what a table of contents is going to be, or doing the research, to put together some stories. And so you start to scratch out ideas of like what could be the next topic of interest. And Spider-Man's always been my guy. So I started thinking about different things that were important to me in terms of Spider-Man and films specifically. I mean, there's a lot of books out there about his comic run, and what was I gonna contribute to that was going to be original. I've always been covering films, and I figured I would focus on his films. But even as I drilled down into that, there were a number of stories that stood out to me that I was like, oh, I would like to get into that. One of them being Shailene Woodley's turn as Mary Jane Watson, what could have been in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I loved the story of Andrew Garfield surprising the fans at Comic-Con, by dressing up in that chintzy costume. And I was like, I'm going to get the behind the scenes. Oh God, I go back and rewatch that video, every couple of months because it's just so inspiring. And I was like, I'd love to talk to some people who were behind the scenes of that day. Like, what did they think? Were they afraid? Did they think he was going to pull it off? And there's so much stuff with Raimi, how come he had to use Venom in Spider-Man 3? Was it really all Avi? What would Spider-Man 4 have looked like if he'd been able to do it? So I started mapping out the types of stories that me as a Spider-Man fan would want to know more about. And before I knew it, I had an outline, a strong enough outline to say like, all right, I guess I'm going down this route again. And so, I will say I'm way more proud of this book. I feel like I had a better handle on how to put a book together. And I just think that because the Snyder Cut book was so laser focused on a relatively small story, still some cool angles in it, but a relatively small story. I think I have a lot more interesting stories in this Spider-Man book that if you're a fan of the character, you're going to find some stuff in there that you enjoy.
Yeah, from reading your book on Zack Snyder and then to this one, I can definitely tell that there's a more, not saying you didn't weren't passionate about the first one, but you can really tell your passion for the character in this, and that your deep love for the character. And so it really comes through in not only your organization, but the discussion. And I kind of want to lead it to kind of our first question is, you established very early on in the book that the big theme of the appeal of Spider-Man is that everyone can wear the mask. Why do you think that that's an important way to start off with, and you keep revisiting that theme throughout the book?
Well, because the first big question that I asked myself is, why is he so popular? What makes him so universally beloved? And I mentioned that we're in a golden age of comic book movies, and I truly believe that the past 20 years has been something remarkable. And you've seen new characters get introduced, not new characters, but new characters brought to film. People like the Guardians of the Galaxy, people like Shang-Chi, someone like, a group like the Eternals. But Spider-Man's a staple. And so I kept asking myself, like, how come? Why? And then I would hear from different people. As I have quotes from there from Destin Daniel Cretton, who directed Shang-Chi, and he talks about how there were no Asian superheroes that he could dress up as, that he could, see himself as. And then Andrew Garfield spoke about, like, because he's covered from head to toe, you don't see his race, you don't see his gender. He legitimately can be anybody. And it was a concept that I never thought about. It just never occurred to me that that's why he might have such universal appeal to everybody. There's so many characters that we could picture ourselves as. We all, if you're in a swimming pool, you pretend you're Superman, right? You go through the water and you stretch out and you believe that you're flying. But Spider-Man, he can appeal to anybody because, like you said, the mask covers his features. And it helped that became a central theme of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I knew I wanted to definitely touch on and emphasize the fact that had become an Oscar winner. But that I was so moved by the scene in Spider-Verse, which ended up becoming a posthumous Stan Lee scene, of him telling Miles, it eventually, it all fits. It always fits eventually, kind of thing. And I was like, that means so much to me. I can only imagine how much it means to everybody else. And so I decided that was going to become sort of the central theme of the book, of that there are so many reasons why he's become popular from a business perspective, but from a fan perspective, why do we keep gravitating back towards him in comic book form, in video games, as cosplayers who dress up to become him? Why is his influence global? And so I hope that the book tries to at least suggest an answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you, I had a little bit of a preconceived notion that this book was going to basically be Maguire, Holland, and Garfield. And yes, they're obviously very significant parts, but I did really appreciate that you touched on the other live action Spider-Man shows as well. You touched on the Nicholas Hammond show, Amazing Spider-Man from the 70s, the Japanese Spider-Man show. And I think it was really important that you include those because they're part of that history leading towards that cinematic viewpoint.
For sure, because one of the things that I wanted to illustrate as I started to tell this story was how the creators who decided that they were going to bring him to live action solved the problems of making this animated figure look realistic in real life, and the limitations that they faced. Like Nicholas Hammond admits, fully that they didn't do classic Spider-Man villains because they didn't have the budget necessarily, and they wanted to keep it a little more grounded, where he fought like street level crooks kind of thing. But then when you even get into the Raimi films and the experimentations that he did versus we're going to use a CGI character versus a stunt person. Well, like when Spider-Man lands, from swinging, it's just your kneecaps would blow out. Like there's things you can draw that you can't do in live action. And I really wanted to try to, over the course of the years, touch on how each production educated the next one. And so you get into some of the VFX with Jerome Chen, who did stuff for the 2 Mark Webb films. And he talked about the different things that they learned from Raimi and how they wanted to distance themselves from the Raimi films, but also sort of advance it. And then, of course, you get to a point where you can send Spider-Man to space and he fights Thanos. How far is that from Nicholas Hammond, which again is only, say, 30 years? It's not light years, essentially. And we've come so far so fast.
Our buddy Scott wanted to do a drive-by, say hi for you, Sean. He's going to watch it a little bit later.
I love Scott. Thank you, Scott. Good to see you.
One thing I didn't know about a lot, and I read the business side quite a bit on these things, and so I know the broad strokes at least, and more details in more relatively recent history. I didn't realize that Canon movie productions had their hands in Spider-Man, at least for a little while. Obviously they were really trying to make the superhero thing work for them, because I know they have a history with Superman as well. That really took me by surprise to find out the Spider-Man movie that could have been, maybe, and like just what would have. I wonder now, ever since reading that, like, what could have changed? Like, what would we have ever gotten Raimi Spider-Mans? Would we have ever gotten Tom Holland, in Avengers Endgame, for example? It's just wild to think about how different Spider-Man's history could have gone.
Oh, you would never. Yeah, exactly. Each of those moments are, turning points, forks in the road. That if we had gone down a certain direction, if one of those other earlier productions had succeeded, our current history with the character probably is completely different.
Hmm.
And yeah, you talk about the canon ones. I think canon eventually would have drove Spider-Man into the ground much the same way they did with Superman, because they were never one to really pony up full-on
No,
budgets
no.
to make real movies. But the James Cameron one, Cameron was really serious about making this movie. And, he wanted DiCaprio to play Peter Parker at the time. He's got that script treatment. I've got a copy of it somewhere around here on the bookshelf, of wanting to go down a little bit of a darker path and exploring how somebody who received these powers would explore them. And he attached a lot of it to like teenage puberty and sort of coming to terms with your body in that way. Cameron got a little weird, but he was in between like T2 and True Lies, and it might have affected Titanic. It could have sent Cameron down. Like there could be a reality where there's 4 James Cameron Spider-Man movies, and we never get to see anything. Maybe he's not in Pandora for all we know. For all we know. So all of those little alternate histories, the what ifs of the world, I found to be really fascinating and wanted to try to explore them as best you can. The hardest thing about those stories is that, because they aren't fully fleshed out products, finding people who could talk about them was a challenge, so I was really happy to get Joe Zito, who was a director who was really workshopping the canon one. And I was blessed to speak with James Cameron, which was phenomenal. He was promoting a book of sketches and illustrations that he had worked on previously. It goes back to the first Terminator and his aliens, and then a lot of Pandora. And he has a section in there about Spider-Man, which allowed me to sort of pick his brain about what he wanted to do at the time. And he's still super open about like, the fact that he was really into that idea and wanted to get it off the ground.
Now, you touch on, like, you spend a lot of time, and I think it's very much warranted. But I remember when No Way Home was coming out, and a good chunk of some of the fan base kind of was pushing back at the end during the credits with that big thank you to Avi Arad for his role in getting Spider-Man to the big screen. Your book dedicates a lot of time of why that is. Do you feel that people had forgotten about how instrumental he was? Like, basically, Feige had almost overtaken him just because of what he'd become, but without Avi, there would be no Kevin.
Yeah, that's my opinion. That's the way that I translate that relationship. Other people could probably translate it a different way, and I think that people hold a grudge against Avi because he became super bullish about Venom, and they maybe take Sam Raimi's side over Avi, who clearly chose a villain who he felt was going to inspire toys and appealed more towards kids, than Raimi's sensibility. And at the time, I think a lot of people felt that Raimi, coming off of Spider-Man 1 and 2, should have had, carte blanche to be able to do whatever the heck he wanted, but he lost the battle. And he succumbed. He legitimately, he confesses to the fact that, like, yes, I gave in to the studio. Yes, I agreed to put Venom into the movie, even though I didn't want him to be there. But I don't think that those conflicts, which happened, can reduce the impact that Avi had in getting Marvel set up in Hollywood, essentially from the earliest days. Like, Marvel Comics had been going through, and Marvel Entertainment, which it became, had been going through so many different bankruptcies and cash problems. And they knew that licensing their characters out was a surefire way for them to just get an influx of cash. And they, of course, wanted to use those movies as commercials to sell more toys. But Avi's the one. He was the foot soldier who went door to door at all these different studios. He set up the deal for the X-Men at Fox with Tom Rothman. He set up the deal at New Line for them to do Blade. He negotiated the deal with Sony. He offered Sony in still a deal that keeps me up at night, where he offered Sony, the entire Marvel slate for 25 million. 25 million. They could have had everybody. And Sony was like, no, we only want Spider-Man. No, nothing else matters. We'll take Spider-Man for 10 million. And Avi was one at the center of all those. And, you know, there were a couple of times, and I document them all in the book. There were a couple of times when other conglomerates tried to come in and make an appeal to the Marvel board, essentially, to the board of directors who were funding them behind the scenes, and say, hey, we want to buy these guys out, Avi and Ike Perlmutter. And Avi and Ike were always able to sort of swoop in and still convince them why they were the best partners to keep Marvel afloat, to keep the contacts going. And producers at the studio level, Hollywood's an incestuous town. They liked Avi. They really did enjoy working with Avi. You know, they know he's eccentric, but he came in and he brought in the right people. He brought in Richard Donner and Lauren Shuler Donner to back the X-Men movies, and they were incredibly talented and knew what they were doing. He was instrumental in hiring Sam Raimi to make the Spider-Man films, and then bringing in Amy Pascal. And like you said, there's no Kevin without Avi. Like, Kevin was a assistant on X-Men. Avi handpicked him and brought him over to Spider-Man. And then Kevin credits Avi with everything that he learned on those Spider-Man films and sort of branched in that direction. So you can disagree with some decisions that Avi made later on, but he is instrumental in the formation of Marvel Studios.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have willfully forgotten that his involvement, you know, all the way back to Blade. Like, many people will champion that Blade kickstarted the modern age of comic book movies. It's like, well, Avi was there, and he was there as part of the X-Men, and of course the Spider-Man movies. You talked a fair amount about what could have been Spider-Man 4, but there was one thing in there you said that really, really stuck out at me. And it's just a small little blip. You mentioned the possibility of them actually doing a Spider-Man 5 and filming it at the same time as Spider-Man 4. That's pretty common nowadays. I don't remember hearing about that back as much then, 10, 12 years ago. But do you just... pure speculation, obviously, we'll never know. Do you think if they had done that, we get to a point where it's actually Maguire who joins the MCU? Because timeline-wise, there would have been overlap there.
That's fascinating. I never actually thought of that. It would have been tough, because one of the things that made Spider-Man 4 harder to do is how expensive Tobey was. Like, they had to fork over a lot of money up front to keep him in the suit. And I think a big part of the reason why they wanted to shoot 4 and 5 together was just so that they could use him while they had him, kind of thing, because he was branching off to do so many other pictures, or even just losing interest in playing in the character, kind of thing. So had you dangled, that's fascinating. Had you dangled the possibility of jumping over to the MCU to Tobey Maguire, I don't know if he would have taken it. I don't know if he would have been as enthusiastic of doing it the way that Tom Holland was when he got the opportunity. I do feel that there was just a certain bit of Tobey Maguire that was kind of done with it all at that point. And that's why he didn't fight as hard to get Spider-Man 4 made. And I think there was a quote that Matt Tolmach says around that time where he was like, to do 4 and 5 together, you would have needed 2 great scripts, and they didn't even have one good script. So pushing it forward would have been tough. But yeah, that's another terrific what if. What if that Spider-Man could have been brought over earlier. However, you have to argue, if they did 4 and 5, and if 4 and 5 did well, then Amy Pascal doesn't have any reason to want to give power and leverage over to Kevin Feige at that point. She almost has to fail with the 2 web films for her to finally turn around to Kevin and say, all right, help me, because I guess I don't know what I'm doing here.
Even what was the idea of what 4 would be, there was at least in my opinion, there was something there. And I'd always wondered, like you said, the what if, would that Spider-Man 4 would have it brought back to the love of 1 and 2? It's always a question that we'll never know. Right.
And Sam wanted to try to recapture that tone. But it's hard, like these are, and you experience some of this with the Snyder Cut, or I did anyway too, where the fans just want Zack to do Justice League 2 and 3 essentially, right? Like, just let's get the band back together and reclaim that magic. Well, it's really hard, people move on, and interests move on, and priorities change for actors, for directors, for producers, for everybody. And 1 and 2, because Raimi's 1 and 2, because they shot them essentially back to back. Like, Raimi, celebrated the opening weekend and then started work on part 2. It was lightning in a bottle. It was a little bit lightning in a bottle, and the casting worked. They had a good story, but to try to sustain that like how many franchises do we know that are still great by, part 5? It's rare. It's very rare for a number of different reasons.
When getting into, when you frame the beginning of Webb's franchise around Andrew's CC speech, that's what won me over personally. Like you say, like I will go and occasionally go watch it because you truly believe, and you see that again in Andrew's promotion for No Way Home.
Right.
He absolutely loves this character. Do you feel Andrew was the right Peter Parker Spider-Man, but at the wrong time?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I still believe that he's an ideal combination of both. Like, I love him as Peter. He's not a traditional Peter. He's not quite nerdy. He's an outcast in a different sense. He's cooler than Peter should ever be, right? Like, it's hard to look at Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Hard to look at Andrew Garfield and be like, you're a nerdy geek. Like, not really. But he still has an outcast element to him.
That can get Emma Stone,
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah, he's doing fine. I love his Spider-Man. I think his Spider-Man I love the way that he interacted with young kids, and inspired them. Like, those were little beats that Mark Webb weaved in that made him terrific. There's an element of Andrew when he was doing the crane swing where he has to web his injured leg and then run across the rooftop. And I look at his legs every single time and I just think, like, he's a kid, this is legitimately a kid who's swinging off into action. And I think Andrew nails all of that. Now, unfortunately with 2, he had an entire universe foisted on his shoulders, and he had to try to build character while 11 subplots were happening around him. And, it was bad writing. It's bad writing. And it was Sony trying to immediately build up their universe and catch up to Marvel without wanting to take the time to do it. Which is why, more than anything else, I'm glad that No Way Home is a Tom movie. It's very much a Tom movie. But Andrew got his chance to shine, He got to be funny again. He got to show his love for the character again. He got to be a little bit of a big brother mentor, saved Zendaya, it was wonderful. And if they kicked him over to the Sony universe and had him be Spider-Man in those movies, I think that would be a dream come true. Whether he wants to do that or not is anyone's game or anyone's guess. But, No Way Home was Andrew Garfield's redemption, and I was here for it 100%.
Well, while we're talking about Garfield, I remember back in 2012 when the first Amazing Spider-Man came out, that there were all these rumors of the Daily Bugle was going to appear in the Avengers in the background that year, and Avengers Tower was going to appear in Amazing Spider-Man in the background that year. Obviously, the Daily Bugle wasn't even in that movie. I think I know the answer because it really doesn't come up in your book, but did any of your research ever touch anywhere near that, or do you think that was all just pure fan speculation?
I think that was fan speculation because I honestly don't believe, going into The Amazing Spider-Man, that Sony had any desire to work with Marvel at that point. They still were confident in their ability, coming off of the 2 Raimi movies, that they could do it on their own, that they could relaunch this franchise and start with a new Spider-Man who they believed in. They really loved Andrew and they thought he was a great choice. They really loved Mark Webb's decision to go street level. Like, Webb in the book describes this storyboard that he did, which is essentially like a dirty Converse All-Star standing on the edge of a ledge, overlooking Manhattan. And it's supposed to say to you, like, here's this blue collar teen, who could be anybody in your classroom, essentially, who gets bit by a spider and has to figure out how to maneuver that world. I think Sony was extremely confident in it. And so the idea of them cross-pollinating with Marvel that early, I don't think would have been feasible. So,
with Tom, when Tom comes into the role, do you feel that Tom Holland brought to the role that, what do you think he brought into the role that honored the past, but put his own stamp on the character of Peter Parker, Spider-Man?
That's a great question. I think he has the toughest gig of all 3, because Toby went first, and so there was nothing to compare him to. The comics, but no one was like, oh, Nicholas Hammond did it this way. How's Toby going to do it? Toby did it, and he introduced the character. Andrew immediately was going to get compared to Toby. But Tom, when he joined, is joining a universe populated with beloved characters that, for all intents and purposes, was clicking. So let's go back before Civil War, and before we realized that oh, this kid's going to work. Marvel had had a number of wins in a row, and they were largely getting praise for their casting.
Mm-hmm.
He could have been a miss. He could have been, the chemistry might not have fit. Something could have gone wrong. And I think he brings that. He rose immediately to the challenge of, and we talk about this a lot in the book, like people don't stop to think long enough that like his intro scene in the MCU is going toe to toe with Downey, who is, a planet of charisma. And this kid has to essentially go in and just trade lines with him. Most of us would crap our pants kind of thing. And he does it as well as he does. Now, I do think Tom gets shortchanged a little bit by the decision to not touch on his origin beats because of the belief that, and a legitimate belief, but the belief that we don't need to see it again anymore, right? But I want to know those things, and maybe we're going to hear about them in this animated Spider-Man freshman year. There's a chance that it's going to touch on that stuff. Although now I think I'm hearing that's going to be in a multiverse. Is that a separate multiverse story?
Yeah, they've pretty much confirmed that at this point. And if you look at what they're announcing for it, like it doesn't make any sense for it to be.
Because Norman's in it, isn't he?
Yeah, he basically takes the moment where Tony comes in and recruits him. It's Norman that's there instead.
Okay, that's fascinating. That's,
it does. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I want to see that. But what do I think? I think he brought a realistic portrayal of a kid who would have received Spider-Man's powers in a universe that already had that many number of superheroes, right? Like he would become overly obsessed with becoming Avenger. He would be checking his phone constantly to see if Tony was recruiting him for the next mission. He would feel a little bit arrogant about, yes, I can do all this stuff on my own, but of course it's Spider-Man, so he's going to screw up in all these different ways. And
good old Parker luck.
Yeah, I love that about him. And I think that Tom plays that really, really well. Now, I think he played it for 3 movies and that's enough. Now I would really like to see where he's going to go with his next iteration of his interpretation of Spider-Man, because I think now we can really start to get into a more mature take on his Peter Parker. But for what he had to do to get the character off the ground in the MCU, I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, when Tom joined in, I was definitely president of the We Don't Need the Origin Again Yet fan club, because it's like we've seen it twice recently and but we haven't seen, outside a little bit in Spider-Man 3 when Toby, teams up with Harry Osborn, we haven't seen Spider-Man with other superpowered characters, and that was Tom's thing to shine. I know we're butting up on time here with you. I gotta ask this. Last time you were here, last October, a year ago, at this point, we had only seen the first trailer for No Way Home. It was not confirmed yet. It was, the worst kept secret, but it was not confirmed that Maguire and Garfield were going to be appearing in it. And you expressed cautious optimism about them being able to pull off bringing in all the villains, bringing in Maguire, bringing in Garfield, and still serving Tom's role as the Spider-Man of the MCU proper.
Yep.
Now that we're past the honeymoon period of we got there, we've gotten to see it, we've gotten to experience it on the big screen, and we've gotten to live with this movie now for almost a year. How do you think it fared for you looking back?
All right, so I may still have the rose-colored glasses on, but I honestly think they did a perfect job of balancing everything that they had to do. I gave myself a break from it for a little while so that I could then go back and rewatch it from the beginning and really try to appreciate how they juggled story. Now, they skip a couple of things. It's a COVID shoot. I get it. There were a couple of things that are still impacted by the fact that they couldn't just, and also the Marvel secrecy of we're going to shoot on green screen. And, do I wish that Tom's Spider-Man movies had a bit more of a city feel the way that Andrews do? Do I wish he was really in the element and not an Atlanta soundstage? Some of that still rubs me the wrong way. However, the majority of that film, up until the point when we need the other two Spider-Men to show up, is a Tom movie. You know, he's the one who releases or brings the villains into this universe. He gets the opportunity to interact with Otto. I think that the scene in Happy's apartment when Norman transitions gives me chills every single time. I mean, Defoe just kills it, right?
Oh yes, yes.
Is the
he,
Aunt May?
he continues to prove that he's one of the best villains, if not the best villain in the Marvel universe of movies.
Oh yeah,
Incredible. He's just incredible. Maybe some of the villains get short, like maybe Sandman and Lizard get shortchanged a little bit.
the ones that they really couldn't have on set, is my understanding, as much
Yeah.
for various
sure.
reasons. I'm glad they were included versus not, but yeah, like they just didn't get as much to do.
Right. They're there, you know, because they're part of the franchise and they've had to, like, Jamie Foxx shines through. His Electro gets enough to do, and his interactions with Andrew towards the end are great. The science scene where they all get to do science
Yes,
is incredible. It's just incredible. Like, more so than seeing them fight together, although seeing them fight together is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing them interact as Peter is a dream to me, you know, because they're all so different, because the way that they approach their versions of Peter is so unique. And Garfield's giving you a masterclass of how to, you know, act throughout all those movies.
Mhm.
His facial reactions to everything behind the scenes that are going on. He's just having the time of his life.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
especially it's all the questions that we've asked about Andrew. They're able to fit in, like what happened after you face down the Rhino. Who do you become? How are you still dealing with, you know, basically you being you feeling responsible for Gwen's death? Like we get all those answers in such a short amount of time.
Right. And there's enough movie left so that his sacrifice and his loss of his two best friends, you know, Tom's two best friends, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
is felt. Which is why when I hear these stories that Zendaya may come back for whatever the fourth Spider-Man is going to be, like, it makes me angry because she shouldn't. Not right, you know, not right away. And I understand she's one of the most marketable movie stars on the planet. If you could fit her in, great, you're going to want to. But like, that loss has to linger for a little while. It can't be resolved, you know, immediately in the next movie. So there were so many things that movie had to tackle, and not be cheap fan service. And I really felt that the elements that the other Spider-Men brought to the story were so significant. You needed their brain power to come up with solutions in order to take the other villains down. You also get an opportunity where I got to see Toby fight the Lizard, you know? And I've never seen Toby's Spider-Man fight the Lizard before. And I got to see, you know, Dr. Octopus hold Andrew Garfield, you know, by the throat. These are all just like geek elements that I was like, we're never going to see. And they were fantastic. They were so fantastic.
Yes.
So, you know, I geeked out about all of that stuff. And I think the movie's a miracle. I think it's a minor miracle. We're not even touching on the fact that Spider-Man fights Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, you know,
Right.
or takes on, you know, Electro with Sandman's help, you know, in a reverse costume. Like, there's so many cool things that happen in that movie that you just glance over, but they all get in there and they all fit. They all fit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just because we're talking about it, I have to bring up what might be my favorite cameo of all time. My boy Charlie Cox, you know, Matt Murdock. The listeners of this show know I desperately want to see Spider-Man and Daredevil in live action. I've wanted it since it was Toby and Ben Affleck in the roles, and I desperately want that. And I'm like, I have a scene where they're on screen together, and I do occasionally go back and just rewatch that one little scene, you know, that 30, 45 seconds. I love that so much.
My dream for the fourth MCU Spider-Man is that it takes place after Daredevil Born Again, and it's more just like a gang war type story, which involves maybe like Hammerhead, Punisher, you know, Kingpin, Daredevil, and Spider-Man.
Book it.
There's, you know, get out your salt. There is a rumor right now that that's the ballpark they're looking at, and I'm like, give me Spider-Man and Daredevil versus the Kingpin with, if you got time for it, just a little dash of the Punisher on the side there.
Yep.
And
Yep.
but I'm the guy that was like, I kind of want to see Spider-Man and Daredevil even more than I wanted to see the 3 Spider-Men together. Like this may work out the best because now I, quite literally have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite relationships in comics.
100%.
In fact, you mentioned in the book that there's an Avengers issue where the Avengers are talking to Daredevil about Spider-Man. And
Yes.
while I have not read that issue because frankly I didn't know about it, I have bookmarked it in my Marvel Unlimited account so that I can go
Good.
back and check it out, just because the relationship between these two characters fascinates me so much.
You got to read that. Spider-Man has a real chip on his shoulder in that issue, and he does not want to have to prove himself to the Avengers. He thinks he's above all that.
And,
Well,
I am looking forward to it.
Well, especially just to get that truth of that Boss Logic poster, that movie poster you created with there's a spider in the kitchen.
Yes.
With just you see the reflection of the thing, and you see Matt Murdock's cane on the. It's like, I want that. I want that to be so reality.
I know.
Last question before we kind of see what's next for you at that point is, you touch on it in the book in this talk about Into the Spider-Verse. It's such a watershed moment as an animated film and for the character as a whole. We're getting, unfortunately, we would have gotten part 1 this year, but that's been backed off, and it'll happen next year. The movie itself, was a success, but it became a bigger success when it got to the Oscars and everyone really fully discovered this. What about this movie? Because we don't have Miles yet in live action. I'm a believer that's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to happen, but it's going to happen.
Sure.
What about this movie that became more like, for many, it's still their number 1 favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. What about that movie, in your opinion, made it to be in this number 1 list for so many?
It's actually my number 1 as well too. And it's because it captures so many different aspects of what makes Spider-Man special, in unique individual creations of him. Like all of those new Spider characters that we meet are slivers of his personality, whether it be Spider-Gwen or Spider-Noir or even Spider-Ham to a certain extent. The animation was breathtaking, for starters. I will argue that my favorite interpretation of Spider-Man of all time on screen is Chris Pine's version in the beginning scenes of that movie. I just think he nails the sarcasm, the exhaustion, when he's underneath the spinning wheel and he's just like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And when he's fighting Prowler and he's like, are you mad at me? I feel like you're mad at me. Like when I read Spider-Man comics, I read it in that delivery, and so I think Pine nails it. But here's a cultural aspect that I've seen because my wife works in the elementary school system. There is an entire generation of kids now who Miles is their Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Through that movie.
My 6-year-old is one of them. He very, very proudly, Miles is his guy. And he knows, he's like, Peter's your favorite and Miles is mine. Yep, you got it right. And they're both Spider-Man and it's amazing. And yes,
absolutely.
I think Peter Miles is his. Yes.
I think a bunch of old heads like us, who are always going to associate the character with Peter Parker, which is fine. You cannot overlook the fact that movie has opened up a door to the world of Spider-Man, to a brand new generation, which is exactly what it was supposed to do. Is it like, Bendis's comics were designed to bring in new readers, but that movie reached a global audience and taught the lessons of Spider-Man in a way, like it essentially plays out the same thing, but like, Prowler getting shot and killed by the Kingpin is that ultimate loss, that Miles feels responsible for. And it's similar to Uncle Ben, and it's similar to what Peter goes through. And it's just it's overwhelmingly inventive. So you can enjoy it from that aspect. But that aspect of the fact that it introduced an entire new generation and will continue to introduce new generations to a Spider-Man that is now Miles Morales, which I think is going to continue to keep that character relevant for decades to come, is another reason why I think that movie is so significant.
Oh, I'm even more excited. Listener to the show, Brent knows that I'm finally going to get like a big depiction of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099 on there. That is like, if I have to go alternate universe, that's my favorite alternate universe Spider-Man, and I'm beyond excited that Oscar is coming back to voice it, because it just looks, with the small preview we've gotten, it's going to be amazing.
I also think the Spot is a terrific villain for animation.
Yes.
What a random choice, but he's perfect.
Yeah, he is perfect. Again, tons more questions, but I know your time is limited. So, I mean, Brent and I follow you, so we know, but for those that haven't followed you and see, you are getting ready or in the middle of researching your next book.
I'm into it. And I'm writing it. So I wanted to branch away from comic book storytelling a little bit. And so my favorite actor of all time is Bruce Willis. And before the Spider-Man movies, before No Way Home, and actually Avengers Endgame, which is why both of those are over my shoulder. Endgame is the movie that knocked the first Die Hard out of my position. When film critics get asked all the time, what's your favorite movie? That's just a common question that gets asked. And so I always just chose the first Die Hard movie as my favorite movie of all time. And then Endgame knocked it out because I just couldn't believe everything that happened in that movie. And it still blows my mind. But when Bruce Willis announced his retirement, I thought, all right, this is a good time to sort of, again, as I say, sit down, scratch out a couple of notes. If I were to write a book about Bruce, what would I want to focus on? And I started to break down his filmography into these different sections to sort of show that, like, why his retirement means so much and how relevant he was and how impactful he was to the industry. And so I got into, I'm getting into his comedies. I'm getting into his science fiction phase. I'm getting into when he worked with auteurs like Wes Anderson and Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, when he just did his standard action picks, the paycheck gigs that Bruce took. And then, I'm crazy and I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to do a capsule review of every single movie that Bruce Willis has appeared in. As the finale of the book, there are 115, and I have 70 to go. Because that man churned out, that man has churned out 25 direct-to-video DVD films since 2021, and I'm trying to watch every single one of those, and they are mind-numbingly bad. But Bruce has a number of terrific films early on in his career that I really do want to celebrate and try to explain to people why he is as celebrated as he is.
I respect the hustle. Good luck with that, Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if you can't already tell, listeners, if the book is With Great Power: How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. Like, I know you sent us a review copy, but I'm a supporter. I kept my pre-order about it because I believe, even when I was reading halfway through, I said, you've grown a lot as a writer in book 2, in my opinion. You can definitely tell. I mean, again, we just scratched the surface, listeners. There's a lot. Like, Brent and I talked offline and say, like, we knew a good chunk of some of the stuff, but we didn't know where it fit in some of the kind of the backstories behind that what we had heard just being fans. So if you want a book that just chronicles like everything from the very beginnings that you may not know to the stuff that you now know with the MCU, Sean, you've done a great job with this book. Absolutely great job. So
thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I completely co-sign that. It's like you've seen like the little blog pieces of like an overview of Spider-Man's history and stuff. You have not seen it put together this well, this concise, and this compelling. Please, I highly encourage anyone to go check this out.
Oh, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you. You're always welcome on this show, but thank you. Good luck on the tour, and all the best.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Well, before you go, tell people how they can follow you.
Yes.
Social media, at Sean_O'Connell. The book is at W Great Power Book, and just search. So you can go to Amazon if you want to support, the big bad Amazon. But the book is also available all the different places where you can find independent bookstores, Books A Million, and just search for With Great Power and Sean O'Connell, and I will. I'm out there somewhere. So, and Real Blend, my podcast, every week on Fridays. Give it a listen if you guys like movie talk. So,
yes.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Sean.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, that was a lot of fun, as usual. He's been, this is the third time we've been talking with Sean on live, so it's definitely a good guy and has done a lot of good work. But thank you again for coming back on. And, we are way beyond an ad break, but I'm not going to stop the man from telling us all the good stuff at that point. So, so we will take our first ad break, listeners. As you know, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they can be a bit loud, so give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right. Well, yeah, it's an interesting transition. We don't do too many interviews on the show, but yeah, we had some interesting amount of news, like just kind of a weird conglomerate of just random stuff that we were like, oh, that's dropping. Oh, I mean, there's going to be stuff that Brent and I aren't going to talk about tonight just because time and some things we want to wait to see how that shakes out. Like we knew there was a whole lot of casting going on with Agatha, Coven of Chaos.
Yep.
For us, it's awesome news. We're just still kind of waiting to see where that all settles in the sense of where this show is going. So that's why it's happened. We'll cover it another time.
Yeah.
So,
but we got plenty still too that's worth bringing up, including this first one on the Vision.
Oh yes, as I change our background at that point, yes, we had heard rumors for a while that a lot of questions like, where's Vision? Why didn't he pop up in Multiverse of Madness? What's going on with it? Well, we got our answer. It first started with, I'm always being a believer and giving credit where credit is due. On the Hot Mic podcast, insider Jeff Snyder shared a scoop that he had for his Marvel fans. He said, I'm told that next week Marvel will be opening a writer's room for a Vision show titled Vision Quest. When asked if the comic storyline by the same name is going to be part of this plot, Snyder clarified that he doesn't know if it'll be that storyline, which again, Marvel has always kind of sometimes like they will take an idea or take a title and just kind of run with it, and that's all it is.
The Age of Ultron effect is what I think of it.
Don't even get me started on that.
We'll take the title and a totally different story.
Yes, exactly. So, but shortly after, Deadline corroborated Snyder's scoop that Vision Quest is being developed at Marvel Studios and that it would be in its writer's room this coming week. The outlet also noted that word is there is a possibility for Wanda Maximoff, Elizabeth Olsen, to appear, a sign that it's a safe bet that Olsen will be returning for Vision Quest. And always the question, as we just mentioned, Agatha, Coven of Chaos, there's been a lot of smoke with this. And so it finally, WandaVision creator and head writer Jack Schaefer is set to oversee Vision Quest development, according to the report. There's also a big storyline of a character that will almost certainly play into this, and that would be in that series, and that's Tom King's Vision story. His mini-series will also play into this as well.
So Jack Schaefer's involvement in this is actually the news that got me the most excited because obviously WandaVision was fantastic, right? Just such great. We know Jack has involvement with Agatha House of Harkness, and really just cutting out this corner of the Wanda related characters. So yes, she's dead, whatever. I know she's not. We all know she's not. Between House of Harkness and between Vision Quest, which I love that they're using that name, even if it's a different story, it's such a great name. It's pretty clear, I think, between one of these, we're going to see Wanda back again, and I am definitely excited for it. And as All in the Game says, he's happy for Bettany, but he does kind of feel like all this time and resources should be going to already announced projects. See, I don't know for that part if I'm with him, just because they still have unannounced dates on their slate that they need to fill. Vision Quest could absolutely be one of those. And Paul Bettany has been a supporting role in the MCU since literally the very beginning of it. And you can make an argument that he's a co-lead in WandaVision. I would argue that it was still Wanda's show first. Yes. I'm excited to see him get his time, his due as the leading man. And everyone wants to know what happened to the White Vision, Snow Vision, as our Geekverse friends call him. Everyone wants to know what's going on with this. When's he going to show up next? And I love that it's going to be his own project.
Yeah, especially, we've, when Mr. Snell and I hosted the show together, one of our comic book clubs was Vision at that point. And, one could say that WandaVision did take, just kind of alluding, like essentially playing Vision playing house, basically.
Yep.
But there is still so much going on that they could take more from Tom King's run, and Tom King. That's next to Mr. Miracle. That is like my top 2 Tom King like stories. Like it's just, it brings a difference looking at Vision in a different way, that he's more than just a bucket of bolts. Especially when you look at, Vision Quest, the storyline. Yeah, they kind of already dealt with that in WandaVision. So if
they took some scenes that looked almost her going after Vision, it was pretty comparable to the comic there.
Yeah, so I'm cool with them just taking the idea of Vision Quest, just because he's on a quest. He's trying to figure out how he puts himself in this world after he's been quote unquote dead. So
yeah, it is still a quest for Vision. It's a little more metaphorical.
Yeah, as All again saying, just think about those poor VFX artists and the writing on some of these movie shows that needed more time. Again, you're wrong. Not wrong.
Both can be true.
Yeah,
you can be excited for the work, but still want them to be treated better. And it's worth noting that we don't know when this is going to come out, but they do have unannounced dates. So this was always going to be. They just hadn't announced anything yet.
Yeah,
they technically still haven't.
Yeah, no confirmation from Marvel, but. All right, so our next story, we're going to Doom. Dr. Doom, yes. It seems like, we haven't gotten too much with Madam Web at that point. Seems to be every week now we're going with Fantastic Four, little nuggets dropping here or there. And so, again, in an appearance on the Hot Mic podcast, Jeff Snyder revealed that sources have told him that Dr. Doom is not going to be the main villain of the Fantastic Four. He said, I'm told that Dr. Doom is not the villain. Dr. Doom will be introduced basically in like a mid-credit or post-credit scene in Fantastic Four. My Cosmic Circus is Lizzie Hall. It was going to be Lizzie Hill, corroborated reporting saying we had heard this as well. And this is, we just assume it's Victor Von Doom. Even if he's not wearing the Doom armor, he's going to be in some way, shape, or form featured prominently, kind of a la like the very first Fantastic Four movie, or, Fantastic Four stick, because I've still never seen it. I just know that he's in it. So
you're going to watch it before the new Fantastic Four, aren't you?
At some point.
You're going to end up doing it.
Oh, I will. I'm not saying I'm never going to watch it. I just haven't, it's one of those things that I've got other things that I want to enjoy to watch. I don't want to hate watch something.
What's nice for you is by now you've heard how bad it is.
Yes.
When you actually watch it, you won't find it as bad because you're already expecting that level.
Yeah. Well, again, we're the two people that say with a number of people, it's like Venom's fine. Venom 2 is fine.
I like Venom
Morbius
2
is
more
fine. Morbius is fine. But it's especially coming off the heels of the news we talked about last week with Silver Surfer getting a special presentation as a prequel to Fantastic Four. Not having Doom be the main villain of the first one, but being kind of like either a side character or a post-credit scene, I can buy if it means that we do our proper kind of casting of Doom and we kind of let the embers flow of him being this shadowy figure behind the scenes. I'm okay with that right now. I think that it kind of sets up like Fantastic Four 2 in a very bigger way, but am I upset? Just a little bit, but I think that it shows that Feige and the team and oh god, I just forgot the director. Loki, Multiverse, and WandaVision. Shoot, help me out, Brent.
The director of Fantastic Four?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm losing it too.
Oh god, someone in the chat saved me at this
point. Last I've heard is I've just seen. Not everyone was confirmed. I mean, there's Matt Shackman's probably who you're thinking of, but I don't even think that's been confirmed yet.
I don't think anything's...
I think the trades have reported that, but no, it was Matt Shackman. They did confirm that. They confirmed it at
Matt
confirmed
Shackman,
it at D23.
Because I remember he was in the audience. They just kind of waved at him at that point. So
all right, brain farts. Everybody happens.
Yep, brain farts. Yep. So what do you think about this Doom not being supposedly the main villain of this still being written script?
It feels a lot like the Spider-Man playbook, where they didn't immediately jump back to those villains that was used in Spider-Man, those story elements that was used in Spider-Man. I do think we're going to get the Fantastic Four origin in this, most likely. I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't, but it works for me. I think they need to do Doom. I don't want them to just ignore him. So to me, the idea of small cameo introduction or small, like maybe in post-credit, mid-credit idea, like those kind of things. Like I think for Fantastic Four 1, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like by the time we get to the end of Fantastic Four 2, let me go a little more. By the time we get to the end of Fantastic Four 3, we need to have seen Doom. Like in all his glory, we need to have seen Doom. Maybe that won't be in Fantastic Four. Maybe he's gonna show up there, but really have his coming out party in another project. I don't know. But by the time we would get to a presumed third Fantastic Four 3, we need to definitely get to that.
Of course, Travis. You are always the professional at that point. You never forget anything on air.
Forgetting something on air, how unprofessional. You know what?
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna let that go just because I'm on your team this weekend for trivia.
I still haven't chosen my team, so he's not winning any favors right now. But I will. But I still love my friend at that point. He can point it out because again, we jest, but we all have those moments. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we, again, still no official casting. We've heard they are talking to some very interesting people to play Mr. Fantastic. So, but we'll have to see if any of those shake out. But. All right, next story for the night. Let's go to Blade. Let's talk about some Blade. So, there have been some heavy rumors about the director, the new director being named. The Cosmic Circus, Lizzie Hill, reported that Blade may have found its new director in Elegance Bratton. Hill notes that she cannot 100% confirm this information, but she has heard enough to report on the subject. She says that she could mean this announcement is mainly confirming the information is imminent, or it could simply mean that Bratton is on the short list with a few other directors, but in some way the filmmaker is tied up in the Blade movie. Bratton is relatively, still on the outskirts, not a household name, but his directorial debut in 2022's The Inspection earned him rave reviews when it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival and was picked by A24 for a distribution deal. I've heard some pushback against this from other scoopers at this point, but more confirming that Lizzie is right in the sense of Elegance Bratton is on the short list. And so I've never seen the movie. And again, I like that they're trying to find, as Feige can and the team does, like they want a name director, but also they want a director that can bring honor to the character and has a vision for what they want to do that fits in what, Feige and the team are thinking for Blade.
I don't know anything about Bratton, but I'll just trust the process there for finding the director. I'm just excited to hear like there is still news coming out about this, because one thing part of me wondered about was like, how long is it going to be before we do start hearing more information on Blade, since they are going back and retooling that script and needing to find a new director and stuff. They already pushed the movie back the one time. We don't want them to have to keep doing that more than necessary. So the fact that they're narrowing down their director choices at this point, I think is a good sign that they'll be able to make that next movie date.
Do you think that they'll finally announce this before the end of the year? I mean, I know the movie's not supposed to come out till 2024 now in September, but do you think that they're going to feel comfortable enough to at least name it before the end of the year, or is it going to be an early announcement next year?
I mean, there's really no events where this kind of news, like where they drop a ton of stuff until San Diego, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, like, maybe they might announce it if it comes out. Like if the trades report it, they may then say something. But if that doesn't happen, they could easily sit on this till San Diego.
Well, if you paid attention to the chat, we had our first little interesting bot come in there.
Yeah, I saw that. That's all right. Block him.
Yeah, blocked away. Look at that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, delays, just like I view in gaming, delays in movies, disappointing, but also if it gives us the better product, let's delay, let's do it right. So Blade, I love Blade as a character enough that I want to see this done right, especially with who's behind the project right now. So, all right, let's keep on our spider theme for this episode. Go to Venom.
Oh man, here we go.
Here we go. So we have a director for Venom 3, and it is Kelly Marcel is set to direct Venom 3. Deadline shared the news that she will serve as director of Sony Pictures' Venom 3, starring Tom Hardy. It's not surprising news considering that she served as writer and producer of the first 2 Venom films. So Andy Serkis is not coming back to direct this third. The outlet also noted that Marcel will join Hardy as producer while also writing the screenplay from a story developed by the pair. Avi Arad, Matt Talmach, Amy Pascal, and Hutch Parker are also producing. Deadline's insiders noted that Hardy and Marcel, quote-unquote, have always been on the same page in terms of shaping Venom's story, and the pair knowing exactly which direction to take the anti-hero's final chapter. Marcel is also known for helping launch the 50 Shades of Grey franchise by writing its first film. All right, so this movie is still happening, and it's like I kind of like I was like, well, it's not a surprising choice, it's not a inspired choice. It's just like, all right, well, you've helped shepherd the franchise along. Let's see you take it on from the director's aspect.
If we were to look at another franchise where the first movie did, 700-800 million, I don't remember off the top of my head, and the sequel did less, but was still very profitable because it was a lower budget movie, and it came out, it admits, when things were still questionable COVID wise, right? Obviously other movies, Spider-Man No Way Home, for example, did gangbusters, but in general, there's still a little bit of skepticism about where the movies were at the time. Like, it kind of makes sense that, they need a new director, that they look at one of the people who've been writing it the whole time. It's Venom. And so now we know it's a writer of Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage. And I know I enjoy Let There Be Carnage more than I did the first Venom. I've softened on that movie, but the fact that they say Hardy and Marcel have always been on the same page when it comes to shaping Venom's story, all this tells me is Venom 3, whatever it ends up being called, probably Lethal Protector. I'm just...
That's so much a better name.
Yeah, it ultimately, I'm hoping to think it's fine. Like, I feel like that's the ceiling. That the ceiling for the Venom franchise is it's fine. And just getting more and more into who is behind this movie, that's just where I think it's at. So, do I love the choice? Not necessarily, because I don't love the scripts of the last 2. Okay, it is what it is, and I understand why they would do it.
Mm-hmm. All in the Game saying, with the exception of Saving Mr. Banks, the rest of her screenplays have been mediocre. 50 Shades of Grey, Venom 2. Continuing on, he says they needed a higher caliber writer-director to give the third movie a chance of actually being good. And that, it's a subjective opinion. It's as we said before, Venom 2 are fine for me. It's Tom Hardy has gotten the chance to put his stamp on what he feels his character is about. And one cannot say that he does not waver from that in the second movie. They will triple down in this one. Because again, it was successful. Do I wish the movie was not as incredibly short as it was because they left a lot on the table? Sure.
No, I'm glad it's as short as it was.
Well, I'm just saying for like what I was hoping with Carnage, it was just like, oh, okay, that's probably my biggest disappointment about it.
I just wish they hadn't killed him.
Yeah, we know what we're getting with this. So if you were a fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Well, you're probably not going to see Venom 3, or you're just going to see it of how much you're going to dislike the movie.
Everybody's going to go see it. Come on.
Morbid time is over. Bring on Venom 3 at that point.
If you're listening to this show, you're 100% going to see Venom 3, whatever. Venom Lethal Protector. I'm going to
He's putting it out there. He's putting an unofficial fact or fiction out there.
Until they say otherwise. It actually makes a lot of sense for them to call it that.
Yeah, it would be the ending at that point. On the Game saying, just because it worked for Ryan Reynolds doesn't mean every actor should take much ownership of comic book character property. I'm not saying necessarily that I'm agreeing that Tom Hardy is, in my opinion, do I like what he's done with it based on my interpretation? What I like about the Venom character? No, it's not my Venom. But it's proven.
Hashtag not my Venom.
It's proven. People, the general audience, even though that, like you said, Brent, the second one, the box office was down, but still very successful. there's something that's connecting with the general audience. So, in the game, you're like us. They're not making the movie for us. They're just hoping that they bilk us of the $10-$20 that you spend just to go see it once. It's yeah, Ryan Reynolds is an interesting case. Tom Hardy, well, Sony's going to continue to give him the keys to that, and he is getting to do what he wants to do with the character, whether we like it or not. So but guess what? But guess what? I still have these Venom books behind me, and on my Marvel Unlimited app that I can read the Venom I like, in especially the Donny Cates run. So
I just looked it up. Venom 1 made $850, Venom 2 $500. So you're talking about a franchise that's brought in $1.3 billion plus. If Hardy likes Marcel, I completely understand why. And maybe it won't work as well for us, but I understand why Sony would go this direction. Well, again,
Amari has a different title for it. Venom 3 with the 3 right next to it.
I could totally see them doing that. But,
yes, it's
Lethal Protector.
And all the game, and now The Rock with Black Adam as well, man. All in the game. Yeah, you're not living the best life at this point when it comes to some of these characters.
I liked Black Adam way more than I liked the Venom movies.
That
not
is
even close.
Yes, that is true.
Not even close.
I will
had
agree.
A blast with Black Adam. I think I would have given the most positive review of anyone that I listened to of that movie.
And people would say, Brent, wait a minute. I thought, no, okay.
I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, our last story is kind of confirming what we talked about a few weeks ago, but Deadline is officially revealing based off the number of scoopers that were hinting at this, that Marvel Studios has cast Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as the lead in the upcoming Wonder Man series on Disney+. The show will feature Shang-Chi director Destin Daniel Cretton as executive producer and director, while Hawkeye co-producer Andrew Guest will serve as head writer. This will be Yahya's first outing with Marvel Studios, as he is continuing to play the villainous Black Manta in 2018's Aquaman and now 2023's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. His star has literally skyrocketed, from the Five Bloods to Aquaman to Candyman. Like, the man, I literally, him and Jonathan Majors, like, I just equate both of them just saying, like, how they have just hit it big really fast, and they have gotten a lot of acclaim. They are amazing actors, but so glad. And people are like, oh my God, that means he's not going back to DC. We haven't seen what's happening for him in Aquaman. That doesn't mean he can't do both. This isn't like a, we're done with it. I'm glad that he can find a place, and especially what they're doing with the character. They're talking about doing a comedy, and with the news today of Watchmen, Watchmen, especially Watchmen, like, it's going to be a comedy, and now possibly we're hearing Bob Odenkirk is in talks to be his agent.
I saw that. Yeah.
I mean, if you have seen any little bit of his Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, I mean, yes, Bob Odenkirk, yes, you couldn't get any better than that kind of casting. I am very excited, again, just to see. Wonder Man's not a character that people are this is I can't wait for a Wonder Man project. This is going to put some things on the radar of how interesting and complicated of a character Wonder Man is. I mean, look at if you're watching live, these are all the different versions of Simon Williams that has been in iteration right now.
Yeah, it doesn't even have like the ionic form version in there.
Yes.
There's so many different ones. I was thinking about it when you mentioned that there's some people who are like, oh no, that means he's done with DC. It's like, I don't know. I feel like James Gunn probably doesn't mind too much that somebody is playing for both DC and Marvel when it comes to these things. They're just these creatives are just taking parts that they find interesting. So, welcome to the MCU at this point. That's what I say.
Amara Daniels, Black Manta, Dr. Manhattan, Wonder Man. Now he just has to appear in the Sonyverse as well. Well, there's always, he could be in a certain Madam Web project. Why not? Everyone else is.
That is the blueprint.
So it definitely is the blueprint. But yeah, I'm glad this is confirmed. With a lot of smoke, there's fire. And so let us yeah, it's going to be very interesting as we get through this. So, but all right, well, that is all the news that is fit to talk about this week. So we're going to take our next ad break. So listeners, as you know, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on. They can be a bit loud. So give you that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right. So as I pull up from Fact or Fictions from last week, what do we got for questions?
Yeah, first up from Amari, Andrew Garfield never got his trilogy. After No Way Home, would you still want to see an Amazing Spider-Man 3, or do you feel that the door is closed?
Take my money now, Amari. Take my money now.
Yeah.
I will. If you hearing what I thought about Andrew doing in No Way Home, that movie did more for people, more demanding in Andrew Garfield, Amazing Spider-Man 3. They still wanted Toby to do a 4th one, but I think the clamor was, I want to see Andrew get one more shot.
I will never pretend like I don't want a 4th Tom Holland movie the most. But yes, I right behind them, I would take an Andrew Garfield 3. And if they wanted to somehow put Andrew Garfield into the Sony universe, even with Venom, you know what? Fine, I'll take it. That's fine with me. I'd be a little surprised that Garfield went with that, but that's fine. For my money, I would be thrilled at the prospect of having another Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, especially one picking up where No Way Home left off, where he could be influenced by the experiences that he had with Peter's 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we'd love to see that. I think it would be very, very good. And you never know, but right now, it's very interesting just to hear Andrew talk. I can't remember what interview I was listening to and him talking about it, but you could sense that he would love to, but I think right now, after everything No Way Home and him having to not be the werewolf and be the werewolf at the same time, I think he's happy he got to do it, but I think that drive to do it has settled just a bit for him. But again, never say never.
And then the other question we got this week from Anthony from DC Outlaw: if Spider-Man is only in one more Avengers movie, of the 2 that we know of, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, which one do you think it will be?
Secret Wars.
Yeah, I would agree. If they're only going to use them in one, I think it's got to be that one. But
it's got to be the big one to close it out.
I don't think we will be waiting all the way until Secret Wars to see Tom Holland again.
Especially, again, promoting Sean's book one more time, especially as he ends the book and not necessarily revealing anything, like how Sean ends it in the sense of just basically saying, Sony's not an idiot. They know how much this partnership has made both them and Marvel/Disney millions upon millions of dollars, just like No Way Home alone, but how fruitful this partnership has been. I think we'll hear about it next year, revamping the deal, and it'll continue on. But, a question I didn't get to ask Sean is, when do you think Sony will put Spider-Man back in their universe? Like, not necessarily like Tom Holland, but like Spider-Man in general. Like, they're having fun playing with everything around tangential Spider-Man, but when will we see a suited Spider-Man proper in a Sony Spider-Man film?
I mean, I really would be surprised if we got all the way to a 3rd Venom movie and we never see Tom Hardy's Venom throw down with Spider-Man. I also feel like they need to do something different than that movie versus, in Venom 1, he fought a gray symbiote. In Venom 2, he fought a red one. And it's like, I realize obviously Carnage is a bit more than that, but it seems like they should look at doing something. And if they wanted to bring a Spider-Man in, to me, it makes the most sense to go to one of your pre-existing Spider-Man first. Well, Maguire had his Venom, so let's go talk to Garfield, see if he'll come back. If not, maybe they bring in someone new. Maybe that's when we'll get Miles. But I think it'll be within the next couple years, probably sooner than later, we'll start at least hearing about Spider-Man in the Sonyverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but that all the questions?
Yep, that was it. All in the game. The most financially successful non-Avengers trilogy. Oh man, I'd have to fact check this, but I think so. I mean, No Way Home with the re-release crossed $2 billion. They Far From Home cleared $1 billion, and or I'm sorry, yeah, and then Homecoming was 800 million, I believe.
Yeah.
So you're looking at nearly $4 billion franchise, definitely over 3.5. That probably is the most successful non-Avengers trilogy.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
again,
unquestionably for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I'm trying to think of other movies as well, and other franchises as well, and I can't think of one right now.
I mean, if we're just keeping in the superhero genre, yeah, it's. I mean, if you blow it up, Star Wars could definitely.
Star Wars. I mean, well, Star Wars may have, like the sequel trilogy. They may have done that much, but the sequel trilogy it's a little different because it's part of a greater whole.
Yeah.
But regardless, among the superhero movies for sure, Star Wars. I'd have to go look up the numbers. I'd have to go confirm it, but I know all three of them cleared $1 billion, so they may have gotten there.
Yeah. So, but all right. Well, thank you for sending in the questions. Now, fact or fictions for last week. So, number one. We will not see the new Black Panther in costume until the third act of Wakanda Forever. 77% said fact, 23% said fiction. Number two, Deadpool will be in Marvel Zombies Season 2 or later, but not until after Deadpool 3 releases. 60% said fact, 40% said fiction. And number three, we will see T'Challa variant in What If Season 3, voiced by a different actor. 47% said fact, 53% said fiction. Now, fact or fictions this week. I've had a very busy week, and I prepped for this interview and everything like that. I knew I was forgetting something, and when Brent and I started the show, I did not have any fact or fictions. Literally, Sean is coming into the chat, and I'm like, oh, crud, I forgot to do that. So, but as I do, I thought of three as we go through the show, as we start talking. So we have fact or fictions this week, Brent.
Okay. Well, what do you got?
All right. So my first one is Black Panther Wakanda Forever will make $1 billion by the end of its theatrical run.
Fact. Yes, I have no problem believing that.
Yeah, I'm a fact as well, just because again it's taking what the first one did, where the emotion is going in this movie. I definitely see this happening. So
I mean, the first one made $1.3 billion. You could have a sizable drop, a $300 million drop. And I don't know if this is going to release in China, but it's been proven that movies can still make bank without China. If it ends up in China, then even more likely. But it could have a $300 million drop and still be above $1 billion.
Mm-hmm. All right, number two, the next Spider-Man movie will feature a villain that we have not seen on the big screen.
When you say feature, do you mean like as the primary villain?
Yes. Like we have not seen like if you think it's Kingpin, no, that wouldn't count.
I do think it's Kingpin. I'm wish casting here. I mean, there were rumors for it, but we've seen Kingpin on the big screen though, not in the MCU. So I guess I got to go fact because. Or I'm sorry, I got to go fiction.
Yeah, I was about to say, I said, wait a minute.
I'm misspeaking there. I have to go fiction because I think Kingpin is most likely it. Like I legitimately think that.
Yeah, I'm a fiction as well, just because again, it called the willing of Daredevil and Spider-Man being on the big screen together, facing down Kingpin. Because again, Kingpin is a Spider-Man and Daredevil villain, so it would very much be bringing to that idea of bringing Spider-Man back to the street level. After he's been fantastical for basically most of a good part of his career in the MCU. So
yeah, they need to do the street one.
Yep. So all right, my last one, Venom 3. Let's keep talking about it. Will continue the trend that the villain will be another symbiote or symbiote, if you call it that tragedy. But it will not be Null.
Does Null count as a symbiote?
Well, again, symbiote, king of the symbiotes, things like that. I'm just putting it in there. Null will not be. It'll still be a symbiote, but Null will not be a villain in this movie.
I mean, my first thought is they were trying to set up Toxin. See, this is where I say I really feel like they need to do something else. I genuinely believe they need to do something versus him fighting another symbiote. So when you say fact or fiction, the next one will be it's another fact because they need to do something else, but I don't necessarily believe that they will. It's gotta go fact.
I'm gonna go fact too, just because what I said, like they are gonna triple down on everything that they've done and just do it again and find a way to still keep people from coming back. But yeah, I do not see them getting creative with this, especially with the writing team, directing. I just don't see them getting crazy with this third one outside of tripling down on what has quote unquote worked for them.
And objectively, financially, it has worked. So they could just do the same thing again and laugh all the way to the bank.
Yep. And they'll at least have Brent and I's first and
That's
probably
right.
only viewing. So
they get the first one, they have to earn a second.
Because again, we do this for you the people.
I mean, it's got a Marvel logo on it. I'm going to go check it out. Let's be honest.
That's all that Brent needs. Marvel logo, fine. You'll at least have my attention for a little bit.
I do think it'd be fun to go to a Marvel Studios movie and know nothing other than it was Marvel Studios. Have no clue what it was, no idea. Obviously, it would not work for me.
God,
to
I was
do
about to
that
say,
with this show. But can you just imagine, like, if you do, all you know is you're going to Marvel Studios, it'd be hard to pull it off. All the posters and stuff, your tickets, like, it'd be hard to pull off. But if it could be done, that would just be so much fun. I love the idea of that. I will never get into it.
Never going to happen. You literally have to cut yourself off from any social media, any show, anything.
Yeah, you really would. You'd have to turn it all off, not look at anything.
Yeah.
I couldn't even be in our network chat because there's so much stuff.
Nope, you wouldn't.
Not doing it, but I think it would be fun.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. You're Wolf of Wall Street. You're not going anywhere.
Not fucking leaving.
Yep. All right, so I will post those on Sunday afternoon. I at least want to get that Black Panther prediction out there before we get into it. So, all right, well, we've got Comic Book Club as we get to our penultimate look at Uncanny X-Men, but let us announce what we're doing for Comic Book Club for our next one. This was our choice. We kind of hinted around it a little bit, and so our next Comic Book Club will be Marvel Zombies, the original Marvel Zombies by Robert Kirkman and Sean Phillips, issues 1 through 5, including Marvel Zombies Dead Days #1. Now Dead Days was the prequel before Marvel Zombies. It came out after the first set of series. We will be reading Marvel Zombies Dead Days first. Just we'll go chronological to kind of keep it like that. And so if you've never read it, here's just a brief synopsis. Torn from the pages of the Ultimate Fantastic Four, on an Earth shockingly similar to the Marvel universes, an alien virus has mutated all of the world's greatest superheroes into flesh-eating monsters. It took them only hours to destroy life as we know it, but what happens when they run out of humans to eat? So, you got a preview of that in What If? Well, let's look at the book that brought that to life. Pun intended.
Pun intended. All right, so because I'm writing it down right now, Dead Days is first.
Yes,
right?
Dead Days will be first.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. So, but yeah, obviously Marvel Unlimited. Check out Comixology Unlimited. I'm not sure if it's part of that necessarily, but it's gonna be a fun one. So next week we will conclude our exploration of the first 10 issues of Claremont's run of Uncanny X-Men, and then the week after we will start Marvel Zombies. All right, so Brent, we look at issue Uncanny X-Men number 99. What did you think about this? We left off with Wolverine, Jean, and Banshee all like figuring out that they're not on Earth anymore. They're in space.
Okay, the cover. Got to bring up the cover. Colossus, how can we survive in the vacuum of space? And I'm like, I think you're the one that could survive in the vacuum of space, if anyone. But I just think it's funny. No, this issue, I really enjoyed this issue. The art was really working for me this time. That opening splash page of just Wolverine, Jean, and Banshee. Banshee in the forefront there. Just I really, really like this art. I think it was really strong.
Yeah, this was definitely a big step up from the last issue. Nonstop action. I think that's what I can say about this. Like little bits here and there where we're waiting. I'm just laughable. Again, this is just like comic logic at that point. Oh, they're just replacing the crew there all of a sudden without any passes. Yeah, reasons.
No problem there. Yep.
And then Peter busting through his suit at that point. Yeah, that's not a problem at all.
That's
But
a really strong sequence because like Nightcrawler clocks that Peter is not okay. There's something wrong
yeah,
with him. He's actively afraid, which isn't really something that I mean, yes, we've seen him afraid for others, but seemingly afraid for himself is not something we've seen. This metal person made of metal, right, who can pretty much survive anything. And on the same page, we have Storm taking her helmet off and inner monologuing to herself, like how glad she is to be rid of that because, as we know, like Storm is claustrophobic, and so being feeling captive inside that suit was going to get to be too much for her. It's just a really great page.
yeah, it is. And Colossus freaking out because his brother, as a test pilot, died as a cosmonaut on the launch pad. So again, like he's fearing, saying, "Oh, is this going to happen to me?" And you got to love in the sense of less like the design of the space shuttle and the satellites and everything like that. It's basically just a pull out of the 60s and 70s of just sci-fi. It's very, very good. I love the idea of them just crashing the spaceship right into the space station at that point. Yeah, it'll keep hold, and then you got these gigantic sentinels in the space station just smashing things. It's huge fights. Like the whole thing should be breaking up around them at that point. I'm just more laughing at the ludicrousness of this is comics at its finest.
Oh yeah, and you get this speaking of ludicrous, this scene where they're fighting the Sentinels, right? If you're on Marvel Unlimited, it's on page 13. I really have to call this out. It's the bottom middle panel where basically there's like a lever, like think of like a seesaw.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
one character jumps on it and uses it to propel this other character, almost similar to a fastball special, right? Almost similar to what Colossus does with Wolverine when he just chucks them at somebody. The thing is, it was Nightcrawler landing on the seesaw to launch a in metal form Colossus. And I'm like, is the art backwards here? And then the next page is, no, it's Colossus and a ball knocking off a Sentinel's head. I'm like, no, it's not backwards. It's like, I don't understand that. And it's like, it's comic books, it's comic book science all over the place. But I'm like, I don't understand the physics of this one. Not usually my go-to, but in this case, I don't get how that works.
Yeah, it is. It's just, again, we accept it. But I love it that, call it the haunted nature that Peter is big, and he wants to make sure because they can't find Storm, and he's doing everything he can to kind of find her. And luckily finds her. And again, that's a big thing that I think that has stayed with Peter Rasputin throughout the years is that he has a big heart. Like he truly cares about he considers beyond his own family, like the X-Men are his family, and will do anything to protect the family. He has lapses here or there, but no one can question the man's heart, and that's one of the things I truly love about the character throughout the years is that they have kept to that.
And then, of course, the tease for the next one. I'm like, what? We have X-Men versus X-Men with Cyclops in the original team, seemingly the original team, versus the new class, if you will. And I'm very, very stoked to read this issue. But I was good. I was waiting.
Yeah, you waited.
I was waiting. Once we're done here, I can officially read it. Though, if I'm being honest, it won't be tonight. But I am excited to read this to see the X-Men throwing down. Even I'll be honest, I don't remember it, and so I assume it's some sort of fake thing. It's not the real X-Men, whatever. It still should be visually pretty cool to see.
But you gotta love the ending. X-Men versus X-Men to the death.
Absolutely to the death. Yeah, like nobody's gonna die there. They're probably like robot sentinels or something like that. Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. Early Nimrods,
Early Nimrods. There you go.
All right. Well, we will conclude our exploration of Uncanny X-Men by Claremont next week at that point. So, man, a fun episode. A week before, you never know what's going to happen, what we can get a week before the next big MCU movie. But again, we want to thank Sean for coming back on. Again, the book is With Great Power: How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. Again, Brent and I highly recommend it. Get it digitally. There's an audiobook version for you audiobook listeners at that point. It's a really good read. Even if you're like Brent and I and you think you kind of know everything, it's just nice to kind of see.
You don't.
There's some stuff and I was one of the contest winners for Sean when he was saying I've seen some stuff that I cannot necessarily talk about air of some behind the scenes stuff, and it was so, just getting a very special look at that kind of information. It was, thank you, Sean, for taking your time and doing this. It was a great effort, and I again, you're always welcome on the show, and yeah, check out his book. It's definitely a fun read.
Yep, completely co-sign all of that. You need to check this out. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you're a fan of the business side, you're a fan of just movie history in general, like it's a good read. And you know what? It's 300 pages. It's not like you're making this massive commitment that's going to take you 3 months to get through or anything like that. No, it's a good, easy read that will make you want to keep turning the pages.
Yeah. So. But all right, and definitely want to, as always, thank our sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com, for your omnibus hardcover collected edition need. Use that code MarvelGUA at checkout for $2 off every single order. And just a reminder before we officially sign off, remember, we're not going to be live until Friday next week. So again, you will get our big Black Panther Wakanda Forever review Friday night. Audio will drop on Saturday. Again, Walk Through the Multiverse will be taking our Friday slot next week. So you will have some audio to listen to. I don't know what Joe's going to be talking about next week, but definitely check that out. Brent, how can they follow you?
BrentTech Prime on Twitter, on TikTok, and for this week, and
yes,
this week only, who knows, but I was a last minute addition to Star Wars Alliance. Katie had a need of a co-host, and it just happened to work out where I was available, so I was happy to go on and talk about the one of the coolest things in Star Wars ever with the show of Andor. I said it. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I love that show, and I definitely went on to talk about it. So that was a lot of fun. So if you don't normally check out Star Wars Alliance, I would encourage you to anyway, because it's a fun show. But I was on there this week.
Yes, definitely checked out. You did a good job, and again, I've been on Star Wars Alliance looking at the Mando reviews at that point. So we both have been on. So definitely check them out. You can check me out on Twitter at Chris Balgi. You can check out my show, World's Finest True Believers, at Finest Believers. I did drop a new episode this week, DC versus Marvel. Joe came back on and joined me at that point. So looking at that lovely classic, the crossover that no one ever thought was possible. Well, guess what? It did happen, and it did exist. So, all right. Well, let us. So again, you can check out my Twitter handles on that. You can email the show at Marvel Alliance podcast@gmail.com. And follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUA Pod Network. Feel free to email, tweet, provide feedback, fact or fiction, ask questions, continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever platform of choice may be. Thank you again, Sean, for joining us. Thank you all listeners for joining us. Thank you all for watching, listening, wherever you're at. Stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. All right. Post-credits. Wakanda Forever predictions, Brent.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up this question that All in the Game mentioned in the chat. Will Wakanda Forever beat Multiverse of Madness and the first movie's domestic openings, or be somewhere in between? Multiverse of Madness opened at 187, Black Panther 1, 202. So, first prediction number one. Where do you think Wakanda Forever is going to stack up against those two films for opening weekend domestically?
Are we putting in we're putting a number on it?
Yeah, put a number on it.
Okay.
Low stakes. Nothing happens if you're wrong.
Stakes. Yeah, free cup of coffee in the break room, right?
There you go.
I will say yes, it will beat both. I will say domestic opening at 210.
Okay. I'm a little higher than you, but not a ton higher. I'm ballparking 217. So 217 is my. So yes, I do think it's going to top them both. I think 217 is where I'm going to put at it. Actual predictions for the movie. Please, if you've looked at any kind of spoilers or anything, don't send them to us. We don't want to know.
You guys have been guys and gals have been very good about not trying to be trolls about it. We appreciate it.
They always have been across every movie. We continue to genuinely appreciate that. I especially love it when someone wants to say something to me and they DM me and they're like, "Have you watched this yet?" Mm-hmm. And I love that so much. I'm like, please continue that. What? All right, let's just get to the big one. Who is our new Black Panther?
Shuri.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if it's not her.
Now they've been coy about it. Like, is she the only one? Do you think that there's, or is this just some poor chance attempt at misdirect?
Well, that kind of leads into my question
Mm-hmm.
of what I was going to ask you. Is she the only person we see wear the costume at some or the armor at some point in the movie?
I will say no, she will not be the only one wearing the costume at some point. She will be the final one. She will be our Black Panther. But
I think I have to agree. We're on the same page with this. I could see Okoye throwing it on for a scene, or M'Baku throwing it on for a scene, or something. It's like
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
not on both, but just one or the other. Even and just to be clear, if there is a flashback of Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa in costume, I'm not counting that. I'm talking new footage. But I think ultimately at the end of the movie, the Black Panther in the MCU is Shuri. I don't think she will be the only one to have donned the suit in this particular installment.
who do you think, if you had to pick one of the supporting cast, who do you think is going to steal the show?
I mean, based on what I've heard, Queen Ramonda. At this point, I don't see how. Like I've already heard Oscar buzz for her, and I'm like, well, I'm not clicking this article, but I saw the headline, and if that's who people are talking about, and she certainly, I think, stole the show in the trailers. Obviously,
Yes.
Trailer wise, we're talking 5 minutes of screen time total there out of a 2 hour and 42-minute movie, or 2 hour and 41-minute. But right now, I think that's where it's at.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If not her, our Namor would definitely be in the running for that as well.
I think that's our breakout star right there with him, with his first going.
What do you think we're setting up? Because everyone always talks about the MCU is always setting up something. This is This is, next to, technically the holiday special closes out this phase, but this is the last movie that closes it out. What is the setup for this?
Minimal. I honestly think it's minimal. I think this movie is more about grieving and celebrating both T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman. I actually think the long-term setup will be less. If there's anything, maybe that Doctor Doom shot that's similar to what we got of Thanos at the end of Avengers, where you just get one look at him. Maybe that, but even that I don't think is, at this point, I feel like I'm not as confident on that. I don't think I'll go fiction on that, but that I feel like is the most likely thing to be setting up. I don't think any grander, widespread MCU storyline is spinning out of this movie.
Yeah, we'll have to see on that one. All in the game things. So, no chance it tops Last Jedi's 220 for top 5 of all time. I'm not saying it's impossible. There's a possibility. Right now I don't see it.
I mean, if I'm predicting 217, then 220 is in the just the standard unit of error there. Like, absolutely, it's possible.
That will rest heavy, whether you like it or not, of how the reviews kind of come out.
I mean,
that cinema score will be very, very key to that.
I'm obviously being pretty bullish on it if I'm saying 217, because that is a massive opening. But I think it is possible. I mean, I genuinely think, like, even with Boseman's passing, like, when you hear people talk about the first movie, yes, they rightfully praise the performance that he turns in as T'Challa. But he's not the only one people are praising. And all the other people in that first movie that they love, like, they're all back, right? Like, all the core cast are back. Shuri, Okoye, M'Baku,
Martin Freeman.
They're back. Yes, Martin Freeman even, they're back. And so I genuinely think, like, people are really, really going to turn out for this movie. I truly think so.
Yeah, I think it is. Like Brent says, if he's predicting 217, okay, I'm predicting 210 at that point. We're not that far off. It is definitely within the ballpark. What I will say this, we have said Phase 4 has been a big part about identity. And this movie is very much still in that not only identity, but coming to terms with the past of what has happened. And this movie hits both of those on the head as we start plummeting into what the next phases will be marching to in the quote-unquote multiverse saga. This is going to be a very heavy film. This is also going to be a celebration of what Chadwick had established with the role, but also to the future of this franchise, is that where do we continue on without T'Challa and what is going to be continuing. So it's going to be very interesting how this movie weaves that together with Ryan Coogler at the helm. I'm very confident. It's going to be I have high hopes, and it's like you always warn, Brent, don't let your speculation become expectation. My only expectation for this movie is that as long as they honor what was done in the first movie and take it to a different level, then it's accomplished what I want it to do at the very least. Give me good character development. Give me whatever you're introducing. Give me that. But yeah, the character development is going to be key.
I expect great things from this movie. I have one final question for a prediction. One final one. At the end of the movie, does our new Black Panther and Namor, do they team up against a different threat?
I do not see, if we're going to honor what Namor is in the comics, I don't see a team up happening. I see an uneasy truce. But I don't see a team up.
The only way I think they do it is if it's against Atuma. Atuma's pushing Namor.
Yeah, well,
that's the only one I see.
That's been my prediction in the sense of like that second trailer with Atuma being there, Atuma being someone who is pushing for this and manipulating Namor.
Yeah.
So, but all right. Well, we will see you next Friday night around 9:00 on the Geekverse YouTube podcast channel, and we'll give you all the spoilers. So for all you seeing it, Wakanda forever.